Hello and welcome to Fight News Now Extra Boxing Edition. I'm Corey Erdman. Coming up today, the wrestler becomes the fighter once again. Dr. Steelhammer puts up some good numbers and more changes to the December 6th pay-per-view in Montreal. Jermaine Taylor has been charged with first-degree battery and first-degree terroristic threatening after shooting his cousin on August 26th. Taylor is claiming self-defense in the case, stating that he thought his cousin was an intruder. The 36-year-old was allowed to fight on October 8th when he won the IBF middleweight title against Sam Solomon. If charged, Taylor could face up to 26 years in prison. Now, if you didn't think the Ruslan Provodnikov-Jose Luis Castillo card was absurd and dangerous enough, the promoters in Russia have really upped the ante. 62-year-old Mickey Rourke will make his return to the boxing ring in Moscow next weekend when he takes on the 1-9 Elliot Seymour. Now, when Rourke stopped boxing in 1994 after a draw with Sean Gibbons, he was advised to do so because his doctor warned him of permanent brain damage. 20 years later, he will receive a license to fight a 29-year-old man. On to a fight that unfortunately will not be happening. Lucian Bute has been forced to pull out from his December 6th date against Roberto Belanti on pay-per-view. The former champion suffered an injury to his back, meaning the Jean-Pascal Donovan George co-feature will now headline the event. Bute has been training with Freddie Roach and spent much of his camp in the Philippines alongside Manny Pacquiao. Interbox is reportedly looking for an opponent to face Belanti on the night nonetheless. And lastly, Vladimir Klitschko turned in his most impressive performance in years in knocking out Kubrat Pulev last weekend, and it garnered impressive numbers as well. The live airing of the bout on HBO garnered 620,000 viewers, which combined with the numbers from the midnight replay made for 1.02 million viewers overall. This is a massive leap up from the 534,000 Klitschko drew against Alexander Povetkin, and impressive given the fact that the fight was only picked up by the network a week in advance. Joining me now in the Fight Network studios is the sports and business reporter from the Toronto Star, Morgan Campbell. And Morgan, I was in San Antonio over the weekend. I was talking to top-ranked VP Carl Moretti, and he admitted to me that when they first signed Manny Pacquiao, Chris Algieri, which of course we're around the corner from, they were worried about the marketing of this fight. As it turns out, they had plenty to work with. Not all of it is real, Morgan, but apparently they had plenty to work with.
Well, let's, heading into this fight, let's look at the evolution of the different storylines that they've kind of thrown out to the public to make us care about this fight. Because what you have is Manny Pacquiao, the second biggest pay-per-view draw on the planet, versus a guy that's never really fought outside the state of New York, right? So the first one we heard was that Chris Algieri was going to be the fittest fighter Manny Pacquiao ever fought. And if you looked at the press clippings from over the summer, what you heard was that Chris Algieri runs a lot. Chris Algieri does a lot of weight training. Chris Algieri hits the punching bags a lot. You know what? He's obsessive compulsive about these things. Now, normally we just call a person like this a professional athlete. But in this case, they really have to play this up because, again, marketing-wise, there's not a whole lot to work with, and as we'll get into in a minute, Pacquiao and even Mayweather, their pay-per-view numbers are starting to slide, and anything they can grasp at to boost those numbers, that's what they'll use.
Well, and the next level, as you get closer to a big fight, that means that publications that would normally not cover boxing start covering boxing. So then you get your comparisons to boxing movies.
Yes.
So suddenly Chris Algieri is the real-life Rocky.
Well, how many real-life Rockies have we had this year?
We've had a lot of real-life Rockies. Apparently he's the real-life Cinderella man who is a real man. And the other thing I keep hearing is, you'll hear things like, oftentimes in boxing, the prohibitive underdog is the most dangerous. What do you mean oftentimes? The favorite usually wins. That's why they're the favorite. You can look up and down the deep undercard here and see very, very prohibitive underdogs. You haven't heard of them, and they're going to lose. So they've struggled with this, but let's talk about what is real.
Okay.
Let's talk about the marketing of this. Is it going to be difficult for Top Rank, all of this notwithstanding, And given the fact that Algieri has had a lot of press, are they going to be able to sell it even though it's in Macau? Because they did struggle with numbers when Pacquiao fought Brandon Rios.
You know, I don't know if this is the function. The weak pay-per-view numbers, I don't know that they're a function of the fight being in Macau, because Macau is exactly 12 hours, was it exactly 12 hours ahead of us?
Yes.
So it's exactly 12 hours ahead of us. So something that's on at nighttime for us is on in the daytime in Macau. It lines up. You can still have a full arena. It's not like we have to wake up in North America. It's not like we have to wake up at 6 in the morning to watch this fight. The Thriller in Manila was on in the morning. Didn't stop people from watching it. It's not a function of the time difference, but what the time difference does is it provides a built-in excuse if it doesn't sell. Oh, sorry, we couldn't sell because the fight was all the way in Macau. So somehow viewers over here who aren't affected by the time difference somehow were reluctant to buy it. The problem with the fight is that it costs $70 to watch in high definition. You know, and as I pointed out in a story I wrote in the Star earlier this week, you know, a hardcore rabid Manny Pacquiao fan has no problem parting with $70 to watch Manny Pacquiao fight. Mainstream sports audiences, you know, especially on a Saturday night when there's a lot of college football in Canada, there's a lot of hockey, a lot of other things to watch, $70 is difficult to justify.
Yeah, I think that the difficulty that Top Rank had selling the pay-per-view last time in Macau was the fact that, okay, he was fighting Brandon Rios, who effectively was coming off a loss, and he himself was coming off a devastating knockout loss where some people thought he was dead in the ring. Right. You know, it was not good for his image at the time. So, yeah, they did have that built-in excuse. They were trying to say that, hey, we couldn't get the press down there to help cover this fight. Morgan, I mean, we cover fights remotely all the time. It doesn't prevent me from coming on here and talking about a fight. It doesn't prevent you from writing a story about a fight.
Well, right, because when you look at the Super Bowl, and it's an event that's covered internationally by press that come to North America to cover it, but also, again, remotely, and it doesn't affect viewership, you know, in China, in Japan, in England. If people want to watch this event, they'll watch this event. And the other thing is that Top Rank has kind of shifted a lot of these events to China because they've identified China, the Philippines, the rest of Asia as a very, very lucrative and untapped market, and a place where they can sell these pay-per-views for considerably less than they sell them for here. No one in China is paying $70 for a Manny Pacquiao pay-per-view. No one in China is paying the equivalent of $70 to watch Su Shiming, but at a much lower price, just on volume, just on the hundreds of millions of households you can reach, Top Rank makes money. But again, if it doesn't sell here, there's the built-in excuse, oh, well, it happened in China and it was too abstract for North American fans to compute, you know, so they didn't buy it, which really isn't true. Again, the weak numbers are just a reflection of the diminished marketability of a guy who is, Pacquiao is what, almost 36 years old, you know, and who is coming off some losses. That's what it reflects, not any difficulty presented by staging the fight in China.
Well, nonetheless, he's coming off of 2 wins. Let's talk about the guy who's going to be in the ring with, in Chris Algieri. Let's talk about what's going to happen in the ring. No, Chris Algieri's never faced anyone even remotely as good as Manny Pacquiao in his career, but he does have a win over Emmanuel Taylor, who we saw give a pretty tough time to Adrian Broner, and he has a pretty impressive win over Ruslan Provodnikov. What do we know about Chris Algieri? We know he likes to throw a lot of jabs. He's very good with his left hand, but is he going to be able to keep a guy like Pacquiao with such erratic and such explosive movement? Is he going to be able to keep him at the end of that?
Well, one of the things, again, we hear in the build-up to this fight to make Algieri sound more credible and more dangerous is that he's got this he's undefeated, and then he's faced 8 southpaws. There's a difference between fighting, you know, Mike Arnautis and fighting Manny Pacquiao. So, but the one thing he does, one of the things he has going for him is that he's not unaccustomed to facing southpaws and all the angles and the distance issues that go along with that. He does have range, does have a great jab, and has the ability. Now, if you watch him fight, you watch the Arnautis fight, watch the Acuna fight, he didn't move a whole lot in those fights, right? He kind of stood his ground. But again, standing your ground against those guys is different from standing your ground against Manny Pacquiao. The point is, Pacquiao's camp keeps saying, well, he can run, but he can't hide. It's not a given that Algieri will run all night. He fights the way he needs to fight to win the fight. But again, his length, his versatility, you know, and the timing. these are things that he has going in his favor, and these are things that Pacquiao's going to have to contend with.
Yeah, and I think timing is obviously going to be key, as it is in every boxing match. It's going to be key that he times Pacquiao as he tries to explode in. Pacquiao's an ambush fighter. He's not always going to fight. He's a rhythm fighter, but he's not going to fight in predictable rhythm, and Algieri's going to have to figure out, when is this guy going to come in, when is he going to flurry, and how can I stop him from doing that with a jab? And the ways to do that are either to time it perfectly or just keep throwing it out there. You would have to keep jabbing. What do we know about Manny Pacquiao at this point in his career? Well, he doesn't have the explosive knockout power that he used to, Morgan, but he's still very, very quick on his feet. He's still a great volume puncher. He has all of that going for him. He still has otherworldly speed compared to almost every fighter at welterweight.
Right, well, and that's the thing that Algieri's going to have to contend with, because even a slightly diminished Manny Pacquiao is still so far beyond anyone Algieri has ever faced. Yes, Algieri has his win over Ruslan Provodnikov, a really impressive win, but Ruslan Provodnikov, in terms of his skill and his versatility, technique, strategy, several leagues below Manny Pacquiao, and this is what Algieri's going to have to contend with. The one thing, every Pacquiao opponent has kind of figured out is that Pacquiao's an ambush fighter, but a lot of times he kind of tells you when the ambush is coming, and this is how Marquez knocked him out, is that he waited for that moment when Pacquiao kind of squares up and dives in face first and hopes you don't hit him before he hits you, and he kind of sold out on that shot. But I don't know that Algieri has the type of power to really make Pacquiao pay for that tactic.
All right, so a lot of question marks when it comes to a guy who's only been in a boxing match 20 times in his life, and then you factor in his kickboxing.
A lot of
career.
Kickboxing.
Yeah, there we go. So let's make some predictions right here. How do you see this one unfolding?
I think Algieri actually does wind up moving a lot for this fight, because again, standing toe-to-toe with Mike Arnaudis is one thing, going toe-to-toe with Manny Pacquiao, who again might not have the one-punch power anymore, but just has so much speed. It's not something I would advise. I think he moves a lot. I think Pacquiao makes him fight a little bit. I think it's Pacquiao by a pretty dull 12-round decision.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. I think there might be points when he is able to hurt Algieri in the same way that Provodnikov was, but I'm going to take Pacquiao by decision. Algieri might have a shot. There might be some rounds that he does get in there because of his length, but I see the Pac-Man getting another victory. Thank you, Morgan Campbell, for joining us. The action is underway on HBO pay-per-view live on Saturday night.